So you've been in a not at fault car wreck. I want to give you the claims process in a nutshell, both property damage and personal injury side, and give you some tidbits that I have learned over 20 years of representing injury victims here in Georgia. And these tips, tricks, insights into the claims process will help you regardless of whether you're in Georgia or another state. They apply in just about every state in the country. So let's get started. You've been in a not at fault wreck. That means you are not the liable party. You did not get a citation. You've got someone else who is responsible for your property damage and your personal injury claim. How does the claim process work, and what are some of the things that you need to do? So number one, get a police report. You've got to call the police out to the scene, and some of the reasons for that go beyond just the natural reason, which is you want to have somebody who can ultimately testify in court, come out, see how the wreck occurred, make an independent evaluation of who's at fault, who's not, and hopefully that's happened. So that's great. It gets you the police report. There's other information on that police report that's extremely valuable. You'll have the time and date of the wreck. More importantly, you will have the full name, address, telephone number of the at-fault party and their insurance, which is the most important thing. If you don't call the police out, you are blindly trusting that this person, if you even remember to ask, is going to give you their actual insurance information and their identification. So this way, the police do it, and you've got the information you need to pursue and file a claim with the at-fault party's insurance company. It'll also have your information, your insurance, but you're in control of that anyway. The other thing that's real important about the police report that you're going to use in the claims process is the officer will do a diagram of how he or she has investigated and seen how the wreck has occurred from witnesses, everything else. And that's another good point. If there are witnesses, hopefully the police officer has identified those witnesses, what they said happened, and what their phone number, address is, so you can contact those witnesses. Now, I have oftentimes seen where the officer will mention those things, but then there's no identification of the witness. Well, at least you can call the officer afterward, get his notes. Hey, you didn't put in the witness information. I need that from you. This way, these things are done and you're not having to stress on that when your adrenaline's running, you're worried about your injuries, property damage, being there at the scene, all of that. Now, beyond calling the police while you're there at the scene, hopefully you know this for the future and did it in your case, take photographs. I tell people also with a cell phone, do video because that really plays well. Hopefully you kept the vehicles where they were right at the time of the wreck so you can surveil the scene to see exactly how it occurred. That's really good for you long term in the claims process so you can submit that information. Because what you're ultimately going to do is you're going to be responsible to submit information to the adjuster, both on the property damage side and if you're injured on the personal injury side. You want to give them a copy of the police report. Don't expect them to go get it. You want to give them photographs of the scene, the damage to your vehicle, damage to the other party's vehicle. All those things are real important to have and to give to the other side. Don't rely on them to get those things or be willing to give them to you. So you want to do those things. Now, after all that's done, obviously injury, go to the hospital, do those sorts of things. You'll then want to first and foremost file a claim with your insurance. Even though you are not at fault, it is very, very important that you immediately notify your insurance company. Why? Because you want to make sure you preserve a potential claim. We'll talk about it in a minute, why that's important in case the worst case happens long term with the liability side. But that way you have followed whatever your state's rules are. For example, here in Georgia, you've got right about 90 days is what case law says to notify your insurance company to preserve a UM claim. You're not going to know in those first 90 days, most likely, whether you're ever going to need to use your insurance, but you got to put them on notice. So it's not extremely fair, in my opinion. You got to know it. So go ahead, call your insurance, tell them what happened, tell them you're not at fault, get them the police report, again, all of this information that they'll need, and then hopefully they're behind the scenes in case you need them long term. I always tell people you want to be dealing with the liability insurance first and foremost, both for property damage and personal injury. So how do you do that? Well, I always recommend, why wait? Go ahead with the police report information, reach out to the liability insurance company immediately. Oftentimes, police officers will give you you a card right there at the scene that will have that insurance information on it that he or she obtained from the other party. So you don't have to wait on the police report. You can go ahead and set up a claim immediately. Now, you don't have to. Now, what you can do is you can wait. And I say wait 24 hours. You should hear from the liability insurance company if the other party calls them, files a claim. Now, the reason I say why wait is you may not get a phone call. I've seen it oftentimes. Once people reach out to me, they're like, we've never heard from anyone. Well, guess what? Liability, the at-fault party, has not called their insurance hoping you're not going to file a claim. You then need to do it. Don't wait. So it's up to you on what you want to do, depending obviously on injuries and other things that you got to deal with. If you don't have the time immediately to set up a claim, you're okay. You're not going to lose any rights. It's just going to delay things a little bit. All right. So that's important as well. Then how does it move from there? Well, property damage is the thing that gets done the quickest. It's the only real empirical claim that you have in this case, meaning you can get it down to a specific number of what that claim is worth, whether it's the fair market value of the vehicle because the car has been totaled, or repairable, and then you have a diminished value claim as well. I've got some videos on property damage that goes in more depth on how to handle either a total loss or repair and diminished value claim. So check those out so you can get some of those particulars depending on which claim you have. But that will move the quickest. You want to make sure it does. Again, try to deal with liability insurance first and foremost on the property damage. They will first reach out to you. They'll want to take a recorded statement. We always advise people, do not give them a recorded statement. It is only for their benefit. And here in the state of Georgia, you are not legally bound to give a recorded statement to the liability insurance company. So why would you do it? You don't have anything to hide, but that's not the point. They're looking for little tricks and things, mainly on the personal injury side, where they can say, you told me in a recorded statement the day after that you really weren't that injured or you were feeling fine. And they'll use that out of context. Why give it to them? Just nicely decline to do a recorded statement. Tell them you'll get them all the information they need, but you're not doing a recorded statement. They must still adjust the claim. So after you handle that issue, they will want to set up most likely an inspection. Now, they're doing this less and less. A lot of them, Progressives, Allstate, State Farms of the world, some of them will just want you to submit photographs. We're not going to come out and inspect it. Fine. Whatever their system is, if they don't want to come out, that's on them. But if they do, try to get that set up quickly. Whether your vehicle is at the wrecker, you were able to drive it home, it's at your house, you want them to come out as quickly as possible to do an inspection, or get them the photographs as quickly as possible so it gets moving forward. Why do they need it? They're first going to make a determination based off of the value of your vehicle, whether they're going to consider it a total loss or repairable. And you want them to make that decision as quickly as possible. So what I tell people is after the inspection or you upload photographs, give them a day or two, reach back out. Hey, have you made a decision if you haven't heard from them? Don't let it sit for weeks and weeks. Now, while this is happening, you also don't have the use of a vehicle most likely. You need to address with them right away, hey, what about a rental car while all this is getting worked out? So oftentimes they'll say, well, we got to investigate first, we got to hear from our insured. Fine. But remember, you got loss of use for every day they don't give you a rental. So you either go get a rental yourself or you deal with it from there. So that's something else that you want to look at and have in your back pocket in case you need it. So then after that, what do you do next? So they tell you repairable or not. If it's repairable, that's the harder one. How does all that work? Property damage, that's a total loss, is easier because now you're arguing over how much value. Again, work on the rental. They should put you into a rental. If it's repairable, now you have to deal with what shop to use. You got a couple of options. You always have the legal right to use the shop of your choosing, but sometimes that slows things down. So you've got to make a decision. Do I want to, if they're suggesting some of theirs, do I want to use theirs or use one of my own? How much trust do I have in them? Why is it easier one way or over the other? Well, if you use one of their preferred shops, then the payments go directly to them. They kind of control it a little more. You're out of the process a little bit more. If you use your own shop, they may have to send the check to you first, then you pay the shop. It becomes a little bit more of a headache, but you got to make a decision because you don't control their shop as much as you do one that you go to. You want to make sure OEM parts are used and it's repaired correctly. So big decision there on how you handle that. However you feel most comfortable is the way to go there. So then it gets repaired. You want to make sure you're following that process and the vehicle gets fully repaired, looks good, drives well. That part's done. Now, if it's repairable, you then have a diminished value claim. Check out my diminished value value video to learn the intricacies of that. That's a very difficult claim to pursue on your own. They really try to put the screws to people on diminished value. So don't let them do it. Handle that diminished value claim. Now, what about the personal injury side? So throughout all of this, you should be getting treatment as well. That's why this is difficult. We understand it. It's a lot of pressure on you. You're the victim, but you got to do all these things. You should be treating. To the extent you need treatment, get it. Don't do any more. Don't do any less. Do not take a settlement right away is our opinion. So what's going to happen in the claims process is a lot of these adjusters are going to try to throw money at you early. Hey, we'll cover your bills. So what we'll do is let's come up with an agreement. We'll cover up to $5,000 of your bills. Sign this document here that we're settling that. We'll cover those bills. You just keep us updated on what you need up to that $5,000. Don't do something like that. What if you need more than $5,000 worth of treatment? Your case is worth 3, 4, 5x that. So don't do these things. We've also heard they'll say, hey, we'll go ahead and settle right now, $1,500. I can get it to you, personal injury case settled. We recommend you slow it down on the personal injury because that's more of the long game. Make sure you get all the treatment you need, you're better, before you approach trying to settle a case. So work through all your treatment in the claims process. Don't take a quick settlement. It's not advisable. So you work through all of that. Then at the end, what you're going to want to do is you're going to get all your medical records, all your bills, proof of any lost wages, submit all of that to the adjuster. The adjuster will look through all of that, make arguments, what's related, what's not related, and you will try to resolve your personal injury claim because it's those items of damage plus your pain and suffering. So then you will negotiate what's called the bodily injury adjuster, which is typically separate adjuster from who the property damage adjuster was. So you work through all of that, resolve your case. Now, in the claims process, oftentimes the question becomes, well, what happens if they don't have insurance? Georgia, for instance, is the 7th leading state for lack of any insurance by people driving vehicles. It's against the law, but they're out there. Louisiana is one of the worst. So you have in Louisiana, Mississippi, a couple other places, up to 20 to 25% of people have no insurance coverage driving around. That's why the UM claim is so important on your insurance to set up, because you don't know in advance, right at the time of the wreck, whether this person's going to have insurance or, even worse, how much. So they could have insurance, but they're underinsured. In Georgia, the state minimum is $25,000, $25,000 for property damage and a separate $25,000 for personal injury. That might be enough on property damage, nowadays kind of close, but may not be anywhere close on personal injury. That's where UM comes in, because UM is not only uninsured, it's underinsured motorist coverage. It can add on top of what the liability has. That can go for both property damage and personal injury. So let's say, for instance, you just bought a brand new vehicle, $85,000, and someone totals it in a wreck. You're owed almost $85,000. There's going to be a little bit of depreciation there. They only have $25,000 in property damage. You're only getting $25,000 from liability. You're still out the remainder. $50,000. You got to turn to your insurance on property damage alone. Do you have UM property damage that would add on top of that $25,000? Hopefully you do. Same thing with personal injury. If they have only $25,000 of insurance coverage, thank God they weren't uninsured, but that might not cover more than your ER visit and a couple of weeks of treatment. What if you're treating for months? I've had clients that treat for years, have multiple surgeries. $25,000 is not going to cover it. That's where UM hopefully kicks in on the personal injury side. They call it bodily injury, separate. So that's why at the beginning, it's so important to meet that deadline to get your UM on notice. Even though you're not at fault, you got to do it. You're hoping you never have to file a claim. Plenty of insurance with liability. Everything gets resolved with liability. You never had to touch UM, but you don't know. So you got to get them on notice in case you got to turn to them later. Sometimes you're not turning to them for a year and a half after the wreck, not for property damage, but for personal injury. So vitally important. Probably the biggest thing to take away from this is ensuring that you don't fall for the trap of, oh, I'm not at fault, so my insurance isn't involved. No, get notice to them immediately. I hope this video helps you kind of learn the nutshell of the claims process, both on a property damage and personal injury level. Gave you some tidbits on what to do if you're in a car wreck that you're not at fault for. Thanks for watching the video. Check out our other videos if you enjoyed it. Please comment below with any questions. I'll try to help any way I can, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much.